thanks to people responsible for putting this event together. Certainly the Savages, first and foremost. We have, I believe Stuart Smith was involved in moving the dock around, John Daly for helping us out, DPMS for providing the launches both out here for some of our guests and for trips back and forth from the floating dock. And I'm sure I've forgotten somebody, but thank you all for that. So it gets lost in translation sometimes that this is the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society annual Clark's Island picnic. We are the tenants here on this property, and which we've been here since 1969 when it was provided to us through the estate of Sarah Wingate Taylor. As part of our events, currently we like to include a lands acknowledgement to provide some background for those who occupied these lands prior to us, and I will read that we have for our lands acknowledgement on Clark's Island. We want to acknowledge that Duxbury is, and we are in Plymouth, of course, located on the traditional lands of the Wampanoag and the Massachusetts. These tribal nations inhabited this territory through various times in history, have a 12,000-year history of lasting connections to and stewardship of the unceded lands and waterways. They have endured a painful history of genocide, colonization, and historical misinformation, but that they survive and flourish today, as is evident by their descendants. This acknowledgement statement is a simple but powerful way to show respect and a step towards correcting the stories that have erased Native American history, culture, and ancestral homelands in Duxbury and Plymouth and across the region. It is a way to give honor to these tribal nations, past and present, and a voice to their truth, resilience, reciprocity, and sustainability. Let this land acknowledgement be an opening for all to contemplate a way to join the Native American struggle against the systems of oppression. And then I would like to introduce our speaker today, the Reverend Daniel Dice, who comes to us from St. John's in Duxbury. He's been here, I believe, 4 years, coming by way of prior ministries in Atlanta and in Chicago. And I know Reverend is very excited to be here following our cancellation of 2020 and then 21 as well for weather purposes. And for that, I will turn it over to Reverend Dice.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable, O Rock and Redeemer. In the spring of 2007, I was a seminarian in Manhattan and serving at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine there. It was Holy Week, and I had just received a cryptic email from my home diocese in Ohio. I had been told to show up there at noon the following Tuesday to ask no one for further details, and that they would reimburse my expenses. Now, for anyone in my position, that note was a harbinger of doom. And so during my Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, I felt very much like I was the Walking Dead, approaching my own demise. I was in the tomb. During the Easter Vigil service that weekend, I received a gift. As we moved from the long, dark first half of the service into the first Eucharist of Easter, as the lights came on throughout that cavernous space and the organ launched into action, theatrics all to be sure, and yet, in that moment, I experienced the presence of what I believe to be God in a rare way. That was neither the first nor the last such time, but it was true. That meeting the following Tuesday, by the way, went even more badly than I could have possibly imagined. I was dismissed from the ordination process there, and my whole sense of self was adrift. And yet, that was not the end of my story. From there to Long Island, to Atlanta, to Chicago, I have a decade and a half later found myself in Duxbury/Plymouth, Massachusetts, standing where the Mayflower Pilgrims held their first Sabbath service in 1620. Right here. Each of us has a story to tell. And each of us has wisdom earned from our mistakes and failures, our joys and triumphs, insights that we feel are so meaningful, so important, so valuable, that we want to pass on what we have learned to our children and their children and to all those we care for. I'm wondering if everyone would just stop and give a moment of attention right now to the story of your life. It's the idea we have of ourselves, the story we believe to be our truth. It's the story we tell about ourselves to others and to ourselves every day. In more ways than I care to say here, the way we see ourselves is less a reflection of who we have been in the past than it is the single strongest factor determining who we will be in the future. Sometimes life gets sidetracked. We hit a wall, a barrier we feel we cannot pass, or just too exhausted by the demands and expectations of life. It feels like something is holding us back or standing in our way. When we ponder our mistakes, our failures, the things we feel shame about, the things we want to tell no one about, and certainly have no one come to discover about us, we are remembering times when our lives were upended. The sudden squall that battered the Mayflower's scouting boat, prompting its small crew to land here and seek shelter on this island, was a kind of upending experience. One that left them feeling that not all was going as planned, as they had hoped it would. Some such incidents in life are minor, and we survive them with neither much effort nor reason to retain their memory. And then there are the major ones, the things which leave us floundering, with the vessel of our lives in shreds, the seas high, the winds blustery, the skies dark. Such happen across all areas of life that most matter. Matters of love and belief, work and identity, and things that change us physically. Sometimes upheaval leads to periods of change that last years. Sometimes whole communities experience upheaval for things not of their own doing, such as natural disasters or disease. 2 years ago, this picnic presentation was designed to be a part of the grand quatercentennial, I had to look it up, quatercentennial celebrations the whole region had been planning for a decade to mark the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower and its passengers to these shores. As no one needs reminding, 2020 and ever since has hardly gone as planned. Right now, on top of anything you or I may be facing in our own lives, the population of the entire planet is trying right now to right itself in the wake of global pandemic and its aftermath, and now also dealing with the ripple effects of war and economic injury and uncertainty. Right now, every person on the planet has been pushed into involuntary evolution. And yet, we have a choice. Whether we know it or not, the question we are being asked is, who will we be next? What will the story of ourselves be in this next chapter of not only our own lives, but in the life of our national and global communities? And it is okay to be sad. Bereavement over what was and can no longer be is completely natural. Our emotional response to crisis is natural. We all experience fear, sadness, shame, guilt, anger, loneliness. We all struggle with anxiety over how to get through such times of sorrow, over loss, and embarrassment over the need to ask for help. Hear me, please. You are not alone. You're not alone. The answer for dealing with trying times and life's upheaval is, however, not new, and we all know what it is. In the whole human experience from the beginning of recorded history, we mark transitions with ritual. We do. Like an annual picnic on an island. We gather for times of joy and sorrow. We reenact the physical actions. We say the words that join our personal experience to infinity. Thanksgiving Day, baptisms, weddings, funerals, family reunions. We hug and sing. We dance and cry. We listen and speak. We raise a glass and break bread together. In our joining, we are enabled to see our fear for the lie that it is. In our joining, we are lifted and supported in our sadness. In our joining, we can find absolution and joy in our inherent worth. We find inspiration and peace. We discover that we can be loved and that we are able to love. Times of transition are not to be feared, as they bring us back to our very roots, to the things which tie us to our humanity. When our lives are sidetracked by accidents, mistakes, tragedies, and the like, we are given a rare opportunity for a fresh start. When the fairy tale we tell ourselves about life goes awry, we are invited to write new poetry, sing new songs, try new recipes, shed old habits for new ways of being. We can do this. And it does not matter how young or old we are. It does not matter how much wealth or debt we have. It does not matter if we can't walk as well as we used to, or that we completely missed our senior year of high school the way we thought it should be. And now is such a time for all of us. I suspect we here today are a constellation of everything from atheists and agnostics to active pledging members of my own congregation. There you are. By the way, that's St. John's Church, 410 Washington Street. Services at 9 a.m. on summer Sundays. Pledge cards available at the door. We today are everything from former church attendees and the marginalized faithful to devout Jews and prayerful seekers. Perhaps a fair number of us are the ubiquitous spiritual but not religious. To all, I say, welcome. It is good to see you. I am glad we are here together. The Mayflower Pilgrims were forced from their homes and families because their beliefs were not in line with that of the authorities of the day. They decided that their faith was worth the risk of a perilous sea voyage and the hazards of an unknown country. But being a professional religious person as I am, let me tell you, faith is sometimes a challenge. When I read reports that young people brought up in church increasingly reject the sexism, homophobia, and anti-science views there, when I read that when churches seem unable or unwilling to reform, to be more loving and less judgmental, that people are simply just walking away, that doesn't surprise me. And yet, here we are. We are all of us flawed, and we are all of us blessed, and we all need one another. So let me say to all women who have felt that church tradition or religion in general has whitewashed your value or kept you second class or taught that you matter less in God's eyes than men do, that was wrong. And that was not of God. And to all those of us LGBTQI people against whom the Hebrew and Christian scriptures have been used as weapons, that was wrong. That was not of God. And to all those who have ever experienced sexual harassment or abuse at the hands of any employee of any religious institution, that was wrong. That was not of God. As the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church is so fond of saying, if it's not about love, it's not about God. And so the choice remains ever before us. Each of us has to choose the path to walk, and not choosing is choosing. We, the people, are at our best when we make room at the table for everyone, and when we honor each other's experience, and when we strive to learn from one another. So I invite you, come back to church, or to synagogue, or to wherever we find community that helps and reminds us regularly of the importance of living in commonwealth, in communion with each other and with the divine. We have not gathered today merely to celebrate what happened here 4 centuries ago, to remember the faith and tenacity of the Mayflower voyagers. No, we are here to remember that human civilization has faced disasters and upheavals and changing times over and over again, century after century. We are here to celebrate the fact that there is an answer for our own personal trials, and that is in each other, and, at least for me, in God also. In finding ourselves here today, perhaps we are being invited to rededicate ourselves to the traditions available to us, the opportunities for discovery and fellowship, for sacrament and service, by embracing the fact that the words of not only pilgrim prayers echo from these very stones, but that so too do those of the country's First Nations. Those times in my life that I had close encounters with God, if you will, reach deep into my soul and sustain me as I wade through times of upheaval. That's my story. What's your story? What are the rituals that remind you of your inherent worth? How do any of us connect with others for learning and fellowship, for spirituality and prayer, for healing and service? You are not alone. This town and the communities around it are not alone. We have a heritage of wisdom and prayer seeped into the very ground we walk on. We have churches and temples, schools and libraries. We need not struggle under the sophistry that whispers to us that we must go it alone. Now is the time for a new beginning, to make a brave new world out of our old one, to see past what has passed, and to see the past not as quicksand holding us in place or as shackles from which we need to escape, but as opportunities for shedding unneeded burdens in order to do novel things, to be renewed, to become something new. Ask yourself, what will the story of my life be now? What do I want it to be? What do I need help with, and what insights should we pass on to those who come after us? How might I find a way to sit at the table and tell my tale? The choice is before us. Our lives and the world will present us with upheaval after upheaval. When that happens, what is your rock? And how will you be redeemed for the peace and joy you were made for? let us begin to write a new song, and let us do so today.